Kennedy Sr. My wife and I serve as the managers for the main emergency shelter for Marsh Harbor and the immediate areas of Murphytown, Dunderstown. We've been doing that for approximately 20 years. I have been involved in emergency management for that long. I'm an emergency manager and emergency management specialist. So that's what I do by and large. Mm-hmm. You have questions for me?
Yeah. So what got you into emergency management?
I recognized that I lived in Nassau for a while, and everything looked like it was okay. But I came to Abaco, and it seemed like they were not as organized, and that they didn't have people who were trained and in place. And then Hurricane Floyd came in 1999, and as it was approaching, we were meeting with the council, disaster council or whatever it's called at the time, to try to determine who was going to do what and when, and that really pushed me to get involved. And so I had some training, but I increased the amount of training that I get over time. And it just became something that I recognized as a need, and I just kept going. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how long have you been in Abaco?
About somewhere around 22, 23 years.
Yeah, what brought you here to Abaco?
My wife.
Mm-hmm.
Her parents were here, and she wanted to come. I said, okay, well, I've never been there before, let's try it and see what happens. And we bought a place and we love it.
Mm-hmm. And so what was your personal experience of Hurricane Dorian? Like, can you walk me through it?
Well, of course, I sit on the disaster consultative committee for the district. Actually for the island, but and we were having meetings to discuss what we were to do, who was to do what, and the normative kind of preparation and that kind of thing. And one of the things that stood out to me from our meetings was the conscious effort to speak to the Creole-speaking population. The persons were sent into the communities with the bullhorn to speak to them in Creole, so that they should come to shelters. But we were meeting, and as the storm got closer and more intense, we thought at first it was going to veer off from the Bahamas, and we were not going to get a direct strike. But it didn't. Instead of being weakened, it seemed to have strengthened. Don't hit at it. Leave it. And it strengthened. So we had to start activating what we know we're supposed to do, and that was the main shelters and those other kinds of facilities and moving vehicles and all the rest of that. And some people actually came. We opened the shelters, and some people actually came to the shelter, and the rest was quite intense. I guess that's a kind word to use. The skies darkened, the winds picked up, there were gusts, very strong gusts, but we thought maybe, okay, this is just another storm, we're going to be all right. And then the storm actually came with unimaginable force. There were gusts reported to be 220 to 225 miles an hour, but the sustained winds was 185 miles an hour. That's sustained constantly straight through day and night. People were in the shelters, the main shelter where I am, which was Central Abaco Primary School. And over time, we had metal louvers over, and they were closed, but we heard all kinds of things hitting it. We have to think it was pieces of wood, branches, all kinds of things hitting it, and there was a constant. We looked out through the glass at of the door, which we pushed the desk against the door, stacked water bottles, cases of water on it, put chests and all that on it so that it wouldn't push the door in. And still the corner of the door was waving like this. So we looked out, but you couldn't see anything. When I say couldn't see anything, the wind was blowing the rain and everything straight across, and it was white, so you couldn't really see past that. That's how intense it was. And during our stay, we had several hundred people there, which was actually a low number from past experiences. And part of the building collapsed. One of the sections in the back of where we were, but we couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
We heard the people crying, praying. Some of them were saying obscene, obscene language, you know. But we couldn't open that door for fear of the people in where we were being sucked out, or the storm coming in and pulling people out.
Yeah.
So we didn't open the door. I felt very bad because I couldn't do anything to help the people. That made me, you know, that added to the tension and made me sad.
Yeah.
But eventually the eye came, and there was a group of Defense Force officers who were stationed there for security and manpower. They were able to, I guess, communicate with their base or whatever, and some people came and took the people away who had been in the damaged part of the building, and they moved the sick people, you know, and that kind of thing. So no one was seriously injured. There were some minor injuries. One man did get hit with something and he was unconscious, but I subsequently spoke to him some days later, and he was okay. So that, you know, I felt a little bit better that they were minor injuries. We were prepared for that. You know, we had first aid and all the rest of that, but you couldn't get to the people. That was the part that really, I don't know, it just stuck me. Here's the people who need help, and you can't get to them. You're right there, but you can't. So the storm, the ferocity and intensity of the storm was unimaginable. And then the second half of the storm came, of course, what they call the backside of the storm. It came with, again, sustained winds of 185 miles an hour, they tell us, and gusts. And I told the people who were there, when some people were evacuating in the eye, I said, well, where are you going? Do you know what's left? Do you know where there's a safe place to go? We know that we have a few rooms and places here where you can stay. But some of them left anyway. I looked out the window, out the back, and walked out and looked out, and water was still about 3 to 4 feet. I guess that's more than that, about this high. And so I don't know where the people could go. I guess the high trucks and things that the Defense Force brought were able to carry them, you know, to other places. So that experience was eye-opening. It was one of a kind of experience. Hopefully we don't have to deal with that anymore, but we do know with climate change that the types and intensities of the storms are increasing.
Right.
So we have to be prepared for it. Even though we may not like it, we don't want to think about it, but you got to make that effort to be prepared ahead of time.
Yeah. So you were in charge of the shelter. You were managing the shelter, but you were also still like in the building, living through this storm.
Yes.
And you talk about like when that part of the building collapsed and how hard that was for you that you couldn't help these people.
Yeah.
How do you manage your responsibility in trying to keep everybody in the shelter calm with your own like emotions and fear?
Well, I wasn't afraid.
Okay.
Like I said, I've been doing this for years. I wasn't afraid. The building had been inspected and rated, but of course, no one thought it was going to be 185 miles an hour sustained. I wasn't afraid, and we had I had a miraculous experience. There were some people in the one room where we were, and we understood that the water was beginning to seep under. About an inch of water began to come in, and we were not sure if it was going to continue. So I got up from the cot where I was sleeping. I put on my boots, and I sat down in a chair, and I was looking at that door. And while I'm there, looking at that door, a golden force field, I guess that's the word, the best word, that came right down over where I was. And I looked at it, and I knew I would be fine. But then I thought about there were 39 other people in that room where I am. So I looked back like that, and there was like a golden net over these people. And the net covered every place in the room except for 2 places. And that's where water was dripping from the ceiling. But it wasn't intense, it was just a little bit of dripping. And so I knew we were going to be fine. I don't know how to explain that better than that. Now, after the storm had passed, the island administrator, Ms. Duncombe, the member of parliament, Mr. Henfield, the Honorable Mr. Dorian Henfield, came to the shelter with the officer in charge of the police. They came to the shelter to check on us.
Okay.
Just to see how we were doing, and he was glad to know that we were still alive. You know, we were glad to know that they were still alive because we knew the water. We could see from the top of where we were that the water was still in the road. So they came to see us, and they told us that, you know, they were glad to see us and that resources was going to be mobilized to help us. And sure enough, the members of the Royal Navy came and brought water and some meals ready to eat, military style packet things. Different groups began to come. World Century Kitchen came, and they were giving food because we had to be there for several days because the water had to recede for people to get out. Now, my wife and I, we don't live in Marsh Harbor. We live about 25, 26 miles south. So we didn't get to see our house for several days. But we were there with the people. My wife happened not to be with me at the shelter at that time. She was at her workplace, where she and other members of the family had hunkered down. They were using that place. And they had a very difficult time where they were because the garage door was torn in half, windows were broken or shutters broke, you know, so they had a difficult time and water was encroaching. But at the shelter, the biggest challenge after the storm passed was we did not have sufficient food and water for the number of people that were there. I had to ration water. We had a case of water. This was before the Marines, the Royal English Navy people, Marines came. We had a case of water, and I had to ration water. I couldn't give the children a bottle of water. I had to pour some water in a glass or a cup or something for them because they might not drink it all and someone else could use it. And it made it an intense kind of situation. And over the next few days, people were going out from the shelter and coming back. Some of them were, quote, finding food, end quote, from some of the broken wholesale places and stores. And they were bringing it back there. They set up a little kitchen down on the far end so they could make rice and chicken and that kind of thing. So we kind of had it okay. It still was a bit tense because a lot of people were not able to get out. So they didn't know if their homes were still secured, if their businesses, sometimes we didn't have, well, of course we didn't have phone service. Only one new carrier was working properly and all that. So they were not able to reach their family members and others to check on them. So they were tense. And our job then was to try to not respond negatively to their stress. Because people can, in times of stress, be very aggressive, they can try to intimidate you because they don't have information. There was no way to get information. Because you couldn't, I even had a satellite phone and that wouldn't work because the cloud cover was too heavy. So there are a lot of things that was going on that added to the stress level. So you have to try to make fun, have fun things, keep people busy, talk about whatever information you do have, let them vent, let them vent. So it's a challenge to keep that emotional balance and distancing that's required
Yeah.
But we made it through.
What were some things you did to try and keep people busy and keep them calm?
Well, we organized the people in there to sweep out the water. Sometimes if you get people busy helping with their survival, their surroundings, it made things better. So they were sweeping out the water, they were carrying out any garbage and, you know, that kind of thing after the storm had abated, so that you keep them busy. Then of course you do a little survey, ask people where they're from, you know, all those kinds of things to just help them take their mind off of it a bit, and to distract them. And of course we have some people in those kinds of situations, they want to make jokes, and that's good, you know. I've learned over the years that people's response to disasters may be a bit odd or unusual, but that doesn't mean they're crazy. It means that there's a normal response to stress.
Yeah.
The mind and the body is trying to create a balance, an equilibrium, and so it has to make some adjustments. So I've learned that. So we had some people there who were also volunteers. So when World Century Kitchen came with the food, we had some people put desks around where they could put the food up and people could come by. Get them involved in those kinds of activities. It's not that you won't have stress and strife, but you try to reduce it to the greatest minimum that you possibly can have. So we soldiered on. Eventually people were able to leave, and there were members from the Red Cross there who came in to do assistance. People from other parts, other department heads and groups came in. The Department of Social Services was doing a sterling job, helping us with our head count and all of that. So, you know, we soldiered on. Some of the horror stories, however, that I heard after leaving the shelter still just amazed me how people survived, you know.
So you said you and your wife were separated throughout the storm. She was somewhere else.
Yes.
What was that like?
This was the first time in the 20-some years that we were separated. She did not take the last storm that we were in together at the shelter. She didn't take that very well because of how some people treated us and how they talked to us. And so she said she wasn't coming back to the shelter. So she went to where she works, and her sisters and some of my grandchildren and all were there. That was a traumatic experience as well for her. But not knowing where if she's in a separate place and the phone is working, we can talk, we can communicate. But the main phone company here, BTC, Batelco, was not working. And I found out later that that tower had been broken off. It was laying on the ground. And so we didn't have a means of actually communicating with each other. And that added to the stress, but I prayed about it and I got the sense that she would be okay. So I felt that. But other people, I think about other people who had the same dilemma, the same situation. They didn't know where their family members were. They didn't know if they were living or dead, or if they were injured. They didn't know because there was no way of getting information into the shelter. And so that added to the tension. But again, you try to be honest with people and give them hope at the same time. You know, if in the night you see smoke, it looks like someone is cooking or a fire, you know there are people still alive around in the area. The current is off, electricity is off, but you can tell that there's still signs of life even though you're in that shelter. So you tell people, what you see, there's a light over there, and so it gives them a sense that everything is going to be fine. And you try to keep that, you keep hope in people. And of course, during the days, some people were going out, wading through water and coming back, and they were saying, okay, that they saw this person or that person, or they saw a group of people. I guess the daunting part of some of the reports was that they were wading through water with dead bodies. And that was a first for me to hear about here in this country. that dead bodies were floating in the waters and people were walking through them. And after we were able to evacuate, there was some, as the rumor mill always has it, there was some suggestion that there was going to be a cholera outbreak and so on, and so we initiated the cholera protocols, but of course it would never materialize, and so we were glad, you know. So it is a challenge keeping that, the emotional balance plus the lack of information and being out of touch with friends and relatives for a sustained period of time is a challenge.
And so you said that people reported they were wading through dead bodies. Did you experience any personal loss? Or?
No, I did not experience. All my grandchildren were fine. My wife was fine. My brothers and sisters-in-laws, all of them were fine. I didn't experience any personal loss, except, I'll say this, some members of my Red Cross group that I organized here in 2000. Several of those persons, at least one particular person, was lost, and I found out about that later. One member of the church that I have frequented, one of the pastors, he and I are very close friends. He's now he's now president of the Abaco Christian Council. One of his members was lost during the storm. Another pastor's wife died. One of the members of the class that I taught in first aid, she lost 2 children during the storm.
Wow.
So while it was not my immediate family and direct, but there are people that I know, and that's part of what happens in a small community. So some people that I used to have breakfast with at one of the local restaurants, both of them died in the storm. So Lee Lowe and his sister. So you feel it. Maybe, just maybe not as intense if it was someone in your family, but like I said, this is a small community.
Yeah.
So it's almost like everybody knows, you know, it may not be 6 or 7 steps, it may be 2 or 3 steps of separation, you know. So yeah, you feel that, and over time you get better at recognizing the loss and adjusting, but I do recognize it sometimes, you know, because we had a very strong Red Cross group here, very intense, and you know, I sometimes now say, you know, I wish this one or that one was here because there are things that we need to do. So
yeah,
I feel it.
Do you want to talk about anyone you lost, like?
Not really. I don't want to. You know, I don't want to make other people sad.
Yeah.
You know, I could speak about Jerry or Lorelda or some of the other members of the Red Cross, or I could talk about those persons, but I'd rather celebrate the living and help people with the new normal and the recovery period, even though it's stretching out. And then, of course, after Dorian came COVID-19, which has really increased the intensity of the loneliness and disconnectedness that people feel. So we're trying to recover from Dorian, but also manage in the COVID-19 environment. So it seems like we're in on a long, winding, kind of dimly lit road. But from what I'm seeing, the pace of the recovery here is very slow, but it is actually recovering. So we're getting to where we need to be.
Yeah.
So that's encouraging. I will say a lot of the NGOs who came over to help made an indelible impression and helped a lot of people here. There were some challenges, and when the government established the Ministry for Disaster Preparedness, Recovery, and Reconstruction, there was another positive step in the right direction, and they brought some resources to bear, and the National Emergency Management, NEMA, they have always stepped up to the plate to offer training and the kind of resources that they have. So it's a hopeful time. It's a hopeful time, despite the losses and the fact that I'm guessing now 80 to 90% of the homes and businesses were damaged. Some of them are totally and completely gone. But despite all of that, I believe that the resilience of the people is shining. There is a sense of not enough is happening fast enough. But you could never, you don't have a magic wand you could wave to just make everything okay. So it takes time. Lives can be changed in a second, in minutes, and it could take years to recover. And that's what we have to help our people now to begin to be patient and understanding and recognizing.
Yeah, so we're now about 19 months after Hurricane Dorian.
Yes.
Right, almost 20, I think, because May's around the corner.
Yes.
What you said, this new normal that people are adjusting to and rebuilding their lives. Like, what's going on in Abaco?
After the storm, and immediately after the storm, there were no gas stations. They were operational. There were no churches maybe 2 churches or 3 churches which withstood the storm. No schools were operational. No hardware stores. No food stores. So where we have come since that point is we now have we have food stores, we have gas stations, we have schools who still of course have to adjust to the COVID environment, but we're now making those kinds of progress, and a lot of homes have been repaired. There's still some gaps in what I think could be done or should be done, but I'll say this: the more people prepare ahead of time, the easier it is to recover. A lot of people didn't think it was going to happen. They say, oh no, it's not going to happen. And so they didn't prepare properly, despite the best efforts that I've made and others. So people are forced, for want of a better word, forced to look at the reality that rebuilding, getting their lives back together, it's going to take time. But it's happening. It's just happening slower than everybody would want it to happen. So people are adjusting. Again, of course, there's still a lot of tension, psychological or mental tension that people are expressing, and so you find a lot of people with short patience and that kind of thing. Also, there are a number of persons who came in from other islands who don't know the people and the culture of Abaco. That's creating some friction. There were approximately, it has been said, let me go like that, about 3,000 people who left Abaco in the immediate aftermath of Dorian. Some of those people have returned. Some of them want to return, but there's no place for them to stay. Their homes are uninhabitable. And so there's still this dynamic tension between people who want to come back and then having no place to stay, and those who have made it back trying to make the kind of stopgap repairs so they can be back in their own house. So that's where we are, trying to navigate that. And of course, because of COVID affecting the supply chain, affecting manufacturing in the other countries which we largely depended upon, things are now costing more and taking longer to get here. And when they get here, they go quickly because you've been waiting on them for months. So it's creating some more challenges. But I believe that people will adjust. And of course, in every kind of disaster, the best and the worst comes out in people. So you adjust to it. We have some new people in from some of the government ministries and departments, and a lot of them are bringing in a kind of optimism, a can-do attitude that is very helpful. When I say that, I think back on Ms. Duncombe, the administrator who was here during that heart event, and how all the weight basically was on her shoulder. Because in the immediate aftermath, a lot of people who had been helpful in that recovery committee, in that consultative committee, had to leave because they had no place to stay. So a lot of the weight was on her shoulders. But she soldiered on, and she made the kinds of adjustments and adaptations that were necessary. And I think she should be commended. Because none of us, nobody we know, anticipated Dorian or any hurricane being as intense and have the magnitude the magnitude that it did. Nobody anticipated that. The government didn't see it. I didn't see it. The rest of the people didn't see it. And so I think she's to be commended, along with the officers in charge of the police, the defense force. They have to be commended for, in an unusual circumstance. And I can't leave out the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Henfield, the MP for North, for making the necessary adjustments that they needed at the moment to secure lives and help start getting the government back functioning. They did a great job. And they need a pat on the back for that. In the most difficult, unusual, unanticipated circumstance, they kept it together. I mean, that's the public. I don't know if they cried in the dark and at home in the bed or somewhere like that, or sleeping on the floor in the government building or somewhere, but publicly they kept it together, and that helped us to not be so beaten down by what was happening. And of course, afterwards, the intensity, and you go drive around, you see everything. But I think that's something that we need to mention, just to commend those people for what they did.
So you talked a little bit about like the rebuilding process and all of that, and you spent the storm away from your home. Did you have any damage
most of it.
to your home?
We had some damage to our home. We got a few leaks. Some of the box and the fascia, the soffit is gone. We've had some water encroachment because the storm blew water in. But we have on the materials to repair are on the way, and we have a contractor who's going to do the work for us, and so we're able to live in our house. We have electricity and water and all of that. It's just that there are some things that need to be repaired, some parts of it that need to be repaired. But we're blessed. We're grateful to God that we have a place to go. I think about that because we have people in Abaco sleeping in their cars today while we're talking. That's a reality, because they got to work to try to be able to get back, even with the government assistance, which is not enough for a lot of people, but it's better than nothing. It helps get you back. But again, if you can find work, you got to be here to work. And so you've got to, some people don't want to stay in a tent.
Yeah.
So the only option is to stay in their car. That's an unfortunate reality. If we had a giant building where we could make barracks or something, but we don't have it. Those kinds of places were damaged. And so, that's where we are. But like I said, the recovery is happening. It's just slower than what people would like for it to happen. Slower than I would like for it to happen. But what can you do when you're looking at all of the things which came together to create this situation? So you do what you can every day to help other people.
And so as an emergency management specialist, do you think that we are doing enough for disaster preparedness?
When you say we, you mean the country or the Abaco?
The country.
I could say very few countries do enough. So the Bahamas is not by itself in not doing enough. The reality is it takes money and dedicated persons who have nothing else to do but emergency management. And we're not there yet. We're not at that point. Because the way the structure is, the government itself is legally responsible for emergency management and preparedness. But you don't just have people sitting down waiting for something to happen. You use persons who are already in government and assign them their roles, but they have other responsibilities and duties that they have to perform. So during most of the year, they're doing something else. They're doing what they're getting paid for from the government treasury, from the press, the public press. And so you don't have people who are strictly in every island, in every district, who are strictly doing nothing but that. And I don't anticipate us having an abundance of money from the public press to be able to have people doing that. So what I'm seeing is an increased emphasis on empowering local people, the ordinary citizens and residents, empowering them to do take preparedness measures and that kind of thing. And that's a good initiative that's being led by a number of organizations here under the guidance of the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA. So, no, not enough is being done, but it's not that nothing is being done. The effort is being made to look at the reality. And the reality is the best way to go for this country is to empower people in the communities to increase their capability so that they can do things for themselves. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's where the emphasis is going. I want that effort to continue, and whatever I can do to make that happen. Because the great United States doesn't have enough. Japan, which is known for its preparedness, and China, they don't have enough people who only do that. So we're better than others in the region, but we can't achieve the ideal. I don't believe where everybody in the country is prepared. I don't think that that's a realistic thing to hope for. But we can increase the number of people, increase their capacity, and increase their ability to have the knowledge and the skills to better prepare. So I think we're going in the right direction. And without regard to whoever the government is, I think that effort has to continue.
Mm-hmm. So what are some lessons that you think we can learn from Hurricane Dorian?
One of the lessons that we've learned, and this is a difficult lesson, to expect the unexpected. We need to factor in all of the geological, meteorological data and overlay that what we're seeing happen with climate change, so that we can recognize that the intensity of these kinds of events is not going to abate at this time, and that we need to be changing building codes, helping more people work toward being prepared. All of that has to happen. All of that has to happen so that we can be better prepared to deal with those kinds of realities that's coming. So lessons learned. Put more money aside in the war chest. Help more people be prepared in their local communities. Expect the unexpected. Don't expect what happened 5-10 years ago to happen again, but that it's going to be rather changed and more intense. And I think that that's where we have to go. Of course, some of the practical things which is being done and which was very helpful is pre-positioning supplies, having ships outside of the possible affected area, which has supplies and personnel who can come in, strengthening our agreements, memorandums of understanding with NGOs in other countries. All of that's being done with greater intensity now. So we learned and we're working. And I think that that's a very positive kind of thing that's happening.
And has Dorian taught you anything personally, maybe about yourself, or?
Well, one thing I learned from Dorian is that I'm not as young as I used to be.
No.
But, yeah, it came to fore. But I think I can't say that I learned a whole lot because every disaster is local. It's individual, it's personal. And over the years, I've learned to try to adjust to my own feelings of insufficiency and to adjust to other people's temperaments. They can be very painful when people who you depend upon to work with you go contrary. But that's part of life. That's part of what happens, especially in times of crisis. So I've learned just keep your chin up, keep a smile on your face, keep moving forward consciously, deliberately. One of the things, and I did mention this, one of the things we have to do is practice our disaster plan. That's one of the things that lesson that came to the fore. We've got to make that continuity. We got to keep that going. That's about it.
Okay. And lastly, what are you, after all that Abaco has endured over the last 2 years, right? Hurricane Dorian, COVID.
Yes.
What are your hopes for Abaco and Abaconians?
I hope that Abaco, and I see it happening, rebuilds and they become back better and stronger, and that the economics, the underpinning economics of Abaco becomes more diverse in more hands than just one segment of the society. Another thing is, as difficult as it is for people to accept, we need to engage and incorporate our migrant communities in disaster management and preparedness. That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that we diversify our economy, not just have it in the hands of a few, but also that we would engage all sectors of our society, all the groups in our society in disaster management and preparedness. So that's my hope, that all of us will be more loving and compassionate, toward each other as a result of what has happened.
Interviewed by Mia Cambridge, May 2021. Funding for this interview was provided by the International Organization for Migration Bahamas. Dorian and Beyond, battered but not broken. For more information, please visit us online at www.dorianandbeyond.org.